Not an argument about money, not a confession of cheating, not a secret text message discovered at midnight. It happened over the way my fiancé laughed. We were sitting at a long table in an upscale restaurant downtown, the kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices and the waiter describes each dish like it's a story you're supposed to respect. 8 of us in total, his parents, his sister and her husband, a few of his childhood friends, and me, the woman who was supposed to marry him in a few months. Everything looked perfect from the outside, and then our waiter made a small mistake. Nothing dramatic. He brought the wrong wine, forgot the bread, took a little too long with the entrees, the kind of errors anyone makes when they're young, nervous, and trying too hard to impress. I notice because I've worked those jobs before. I've been that person, smiling through stress, apologizing too much, hoping no one decides you're stupid over a minor slip. My fiancé noticed too, but instead of patience, he chose cruelty. When the waiter brought the wrong dessert, my fiancé laughed, loudly, loud enough that nearby tables turned their heads. Then he said it. Why do you even care how they're treated? That's beneath you. Beneath me. As if basic human decency was something you outgrew once you married into the right family. The table went quiet. His friends smirked. His sister said nothing. His parents stared at their plates. No one corrected him. No one stopped him. I felt my face heat up, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cause a scene. I didn't defend myself in front of everyone. I just said one word. Noted. Then I stood up and walked away. What happened next was something he never saw coming. Something that would unravel our engagement, expose a side of him his family had learned to excuse, and force me to confront a truth I had been avoiding for 2 years. By the end of that night, the bill was already paid, the restaurant manager was standing at our table, and every single person in that room was looking at my fiancé like they were seeing him clearly for the first time, including me. Until that weekend, I thought I knew exactly who I was going to marry. I was wrong. I was 32, confident in my career, comfortable in my independence, and convinced that love, real love, was about shared values more than shared backgrounds. My fiancé and I had been together for 2 years, engaged for 4 months. Long enough to believe we had passed the tests that matter. Long enough that families were already intertwined, deposits were already paid, futures already assumed. He came from old money, the quiet kind, generational wealth that didn't need to be announced because everyone already knew. His family moved through the world with an ease that came from never having to worry about the basics. They vacationed the way other people grocery shopped. They spoke in shorthand about schools, neighborhoods, restaurants, and last names. I didn't grow up like that. I was raised solidly middle class. My parents worked hard. I worked harder. I put myself through college, waited tables, stocked shelves, took every opportunity I could find. I built my career piece by piece. Nothing was handed to me, and I was proud of that. I still am. When we first started dating, he said he loved that about me. Said I was real, grounded, that I reminded him there was a world outside the one he grew up in. I believed him. I wanted to believe him. It felt good to be admired for the very things that once made me feel like an outsider. Our relationship moved quickly but steadily. We met through mutual friends, started dating seriously after a few months, and fell into a rhythm that felt natural. We laughed easily, planned weekends, talked about the future without fear. When he proposed, it didn't feel rushed. It felt inevitable. I noticed small things early on, but I filed them away as quirks. The way he spoke sharply to service staff when something wasn't perfect. How he never said thank you without prompting. How impatience crept into his voice when someone took too long or didn't immediately understand him. I told myself it wasn't malice, just upbringing, just stress. His family didn't help. Dinners with them were polite but curated. Compliments came wrapped in comparisons. His mother praised my work ethic but always added, "It's so impressive how far you've come," like it was a miracle I'd made it into their orbit at all. His sister joked about slumming it when they ate anywhere casual. Everyone laughed. I laughed too, even when it didn't feel funny. I ignored the tension because I loved him, because when it was just the two of us, he was warm, attentive. He held my hand, asked about my day, told me he couldn't imagine life without me. I thought that meant something. That dinner had been planned for weeks. I wanted it to go well. His parents, his sister and brother-in-law, a few childhood friends, 8 people whose opinions mattered more to him than he ever admitted. I made the reservation. planned to pick up the check as a gesture of respect, since his father had been covering most of the wedding expenses. I wanted to show them I belonged. When the evening began, I thought I was succeeding. I had no idea that within hours, I'd see exactly where I stood. The first half of the dinner lulled me into a false sense of relief. Drinks arrived. Appetizers were shared. Conversation flowed the way it does when people want an evening to feel effortless. His father asked about my work and nodded, along with polite interest. His mother complimented my suit. His sister talked about an upcoming vacation, the kind that required no explanation because everyone at the table understood that world instinctively. I relaxed. I remember thinking, this is going well. I remember thinking that maybe I'd been unfair, that maybe I'd let old insecurities color things that weren't really there. Then the waiter brought the wrong wine. He was young, early 20s at most, clean-cut, nervous, in that very specific way people are when they care deeply about doing a good job and are terrified of messing it up. He apologized immediately, cheeks flushing as he explained he'd mixed up two similar orders. I smiled at him and said, "No problem, it happens." My fiancé didn't. "This isn't what I ordered," he said sharply. "Can you not read?" The table went still for half a second. The waiter apologized again and hurried away. My fiancé muttered something under his breath to his sister, something about incompetence. She smirked. I felt a small, tight twist in my stomach, but I told myself not to overreact. Everyone has off moments. Stress can make people short. But it didn't stop there. When the bread didn't arrive quickly, my fiancé sighed loudly and said, "Unbelievable. Do we need to do his job for him?" A couple of his friends chuckled. His parents said nothing. I caught the waiter's eye from across the room and saw the embarrassment settling in, shoulders tense, smile forced. When the entrees took a few extra minutes, my fiancé flagged down the manager and complained that the service was unacceptable, suggested maybe they should hire people who actually know what they're doing. I watched the waiter stand nearby, pretending not to hear, his expression carefully blank. Something inside me shifted then, not anger, recognition. I'd seen this before, not just tonight, in small moments over the last 2 years. The sharp comments about cashiers who were too slow, the jokes about people who peaked in high school and ended up serving food, the way he talked about others when he thought kindness wasn't required. I'd brushed it off, labeled it stress, labeled it humor, labeled it not my problem. But watching him now, watching how easily he turned someone's discomfort into entertainment, I realized this wasn't a bad night. This was a pattern given an audience. I looked around the table. His friends looked amused. His sister looked entertained. His parents looked uncomfortable but silent. No one was stepping in. No one was stopping him. And that's when I understood something that made my chest ache. If this was how he treated people he thought were beneath him, if this was what came out when he felt powerful and supported, then one day, inevitably, this would be how he treated me too. Maybe not now, maybe not while I still impressed him, but eventually. The seed of doubt had been planted long before dessert arrived. I just hadn't let myself name it yet. Dessert was supposed to be the soft landing, the point in the evening where tension dissolves into sweetness and conversation lightens. That's what I told myself as plates were cleared and menus returned, as if I could will the night back onto safer ground. Then the waiter came back with the desserts. 2 guests had ordered similar items. He mixed them up. A simple, honest mistake, the kind you fix in seconds with an apology and a smile. Before he could even open his mouth, my fiancé laughed. Not a quiet laugh, not an awkward one. A sharp, confident laugh that cut through the room and drew attention from nearby tables. Heads turned, forks paused midair. "This is ridiculous," he said, waving a hand dismissively. "We're paying how much to eat here, and this is what we get?" He looked directly at the waiter. "Maybe you should try working somewhere more your speed, like a fast food place." A few of his friends giggled. His sister smirked. His parents stared at the tablecloth like it might save them from being associated with this moment. I felt something snap inside me. I set my fork down slowly, carefully, because I didn't trust my hands not to shake. "That's not okay," I said. He turned to me, still smiling, still entertained. "What?" "Talking to him like that," I said evenly. "He's trying his best." "He's doing a terrible job," my fiancé replied without hesitation. "He made multiple mistakes." "Small mistakes," I said. "Nothing that ruined anyone's evening." He rolled his eyes. "Oh God, here we go. Your working-class hero routine." "It's not a routine," I said, keeping my voice calm. "It's basic respect." "It's his job to serve us correctly," he shot back. If he can't handle it, he shouldn't work here. Everyone makes mistakes, I said, especially when they're new. He leaned back in his chair, that familiar patronizing smile spreading across his face. Why do you even care how they're treated? He asked loudly. That's beneath you. The word hung in the air. Beneath you. A few heads turned at nearby tables. His father cleared his throat uncomfortably. No one said anything. No one defended the waiter. No one corrected him. I felt heat rush to my face, but I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I didn't plead. I looked at him, really looked at him, and said quietly, noted. Then I stood up. I'm going to the restroom, I said to the table, my tone polite, neutral. I walked away before anyone could stop me, past curious stares, past the open kitchen doors, into the hallway near the bathrooms. I stood there for a moment, breathing slowly, trying to understand how caring about another human being had somehow become a flaw in his eyes. I pulled out my phone, spotted the waiter near the kitchen, and approached him gently. Can I speak to you for a second? He looked terrified, probably thought I was about to complain too. I'm so sorry about my table, I said quietly. The way my fiancé has been speaking to you is completely unacceptable. He blinked, clearly caught off guard. It's okay, It's not okay, I interrupted softly. You're doing fine. Everyone has off nights. Everyone makes mistakes. He's being cruel for no reason. His eyes glistened. Thank you, he said. I thought maybe I was just being too sensitive. You're not, I replied. He's being horrible, and I'm sorry you're dealing with it. When I walked back to the table, something in me had already changed. I sat down, barely participated in the conversation, and watched my fiancé laugh with his friends like nothing had happened. But I knew. This wasn't just a bad dinner. This was a revelation. I stayed quiet for the rest of the dinner, but it wasn't because I had nothing to say. It was because I was listening, watching. Not just him, but everyone else at that table. The way his friends leaned closer to him, energized by his confidence. The way his sister laughed easily, like cruelty was a shared language. The way his parents avoided my eyes, their silence louder than any defense could have been. I realized then that I wasn't just reacting to one moment. I was finally allowing myself to see a pattern I'd been editing out of my own memory. When the check came, I surprised myself. I excused myself again, calmly, like this was just another routine moment. I found our waiter near the kitchen and asked him, quietly, to run my card. I told him to add a generous tip, 40%, and to include an extra 100 in cash, just for him. I asked him not to tell the table, just to bring the check back marked paid. He looked at me like he didn't understand at first. Then he nodded, slowly, respectfully, like he'd recognized something important without needing it explained. When I returned to the table, my fiancé was mid-laugh, completely unbothered. 5 minutes later, the waiter came back, placed the check in front of my fiancé, and stepped away. The room shifted. My fiancé opened the folder, expecting a number. His face changed instantly. It says paid. Everyone leaned in. His father frowned. Paid? The bill has already been taken care of, the waiter said politely. All eyes turned to me. I said nothing at first. I took a sip of water, let the moment breathe. You did this? My fiancé asked, disbelief creeping into his voice. I took care of it, I said simply. When? His voice sharpened. You've been sitting here. I stepped away twice, I said. You might remember. Confusion rippled around the table. His mother looked at his sister. His friends stared at me like they were trying to reassemble a story that no longer fit. Before anyone could recover, the waiter returned again. This time, he wasn't alone. The manager stood beside him, and behind them, 3 other servers hovered just close enough to listen. They'd heard everything. I wanted to personally thank you, the manager said, looking directly at me. Your generosity tonight was remarkable, and I want you to know we do not tolerate the way some guests speak to our staff. My fiancé stiffened. Excuse me? I've reviewed the evening with our team, the manager continued, calm but firm. The way you addressed our server was inappropriate and unacceptable. We'd prefer you not return to our establishment. The silence was absolute. Nearby tables openly stared. My fiancé's face drained of color. Do you know who my family is? He demanded. I do, the manager replied, and it doesn't change our policy. His father opened his mouth, likely to smooth things over with connections or money, but I spoke first. He was cruel, I said quietly. He mocked someone who was trying. He enjoyed it. That's not acceptable. His mother's mouth fell open. His sister looked away. His friends suddenly found their phones fascinating. Can we just leave? My fiancé asked, voice shaking. Of course, I said. We walked out in silence. The valet brought our cars. His family dispersed quickly, no goodbyes, no explanations. In the parking lot, it was just the two of us under harsh white lights. I can't believe you did that, he said. Did what? I asked. Paid a bill? Defended someone being mistreated? You humiliated me. No, I said evenly. You humiliated yourself. I just refused to pretend it was okay. You've become sanctimonious, he snapped. And you've become cruel, I replied. That's the difference. We drove separately back to my apartment. He followed me. I knew the real conversation was about to begin. Inside, he didn't waste time. Accused me of betrayal, of making him look like a monster, of choosing a waiter over him. I didn't make you look like anything, I said. I showed you who you were, and I finally stopped lying to myself about it. He tried to recalibrate, apologized if he embarrassed me. Not for what he did. He didn't understand the distinction, and that told me everything. I looked at the engagement ring on the counter, where he'd set it earlier that week, and felt something unexpected. Relief. I need time, I said, to decide whether I can marry someone who thinks empathy is weakness. He scoffed. You're throwing away 2 years over one dinner? It's not one dinner, I said. It's what that dinner revealed. He left, and for the first time since the engagement, I slept deeply. The next morning, the apartment felt different. Not heavier, not sadder, clearer, like a room after the windows have been opened and all the stale air finally escapes. I woke up before my alarm, stared at the ceiling, and realized I wasn't anxious. I wasn't replaying the night, wasn't questioning my words, wasn't crafting imaginary apologies in my head. That alone told me something fundamental had shifted. By noon, my phone started lighting up. First a text, "We need to talk about last night." Then another, "You blindsided me in front of my family." Then a call. I let it ring. When I finally answered, I kept my voice steady. He did not. "You made me look like a monster," he said immediately. "My parents are asking what's wrong with you." "I didn't make you look like anything," I replied. "I repeated your words. I reacted to your behavior." "You sided with a waiter over me," he snapped. "I sided with basic human decency," I said. "You just happened to be on the other side of it." That set him off. He told me I didn't understand his world, that in his family standards mattered, that people paid for excellence and deserved it, that I'd embarrassed him by acting like a moral crusader instead of a supportive partner. He framed my calm as coldness, my boundaries as arrogance. And that's when the outside pressure started. His sister texted, saying I'd overreacted and should apologize to keep the peace. One of his friends messaged me privately, suggesting I'd turned a minor service issue into a public humiliation. His mother called, carefully choosing her words, asking if I was really willing to let one bad night derail everything. I listened. I didn't argue. I didn't defend myself. Because the escalation wasn't about convincing me I was wrong. It was about restoring the hierarchy I had disrupted. I started noticing how the language shifted. No one asked whether the waiter was okay. No one acknowledged the cruelty. The focus was entirely on image, reputation, damage control. The unspoken agreement was clear. I was expected to smooth things over, to absorb discomfort quietly so the system could reset. That expectation settled heavily in my chest. I met him 2 days later for coffee, neutral ground, public space. He looked tired, frustrated, not remorseful. He told me he'd been thinking, and that maybe his tone had been harsh, but that I'd gone too far. He said relationships require compromise, that love means defending each other even when one of you is wrong. "I'm not interested in that kind of love," I said, "the kind that asks me to excuse cruelty." He leaned forward, lowered his voice. "You're acting like this defines me." "It does," I said quietly, "because it wasn't a mistake you regretted. It was a belief you defended." He shook his head. "You're changing. You've become judgmental." "No," I replied. "I've become honest." That was when I felt it. The internal shift. The moment I stopped trying to explain myself in a way he could accept. I saw how much work I'd been doing to bridge a gap he didn't believe existed, how often I'd softened my values to avoid conflict, how easily he dismissed empathy as something optional. When we stood to leave, he reached for my hand. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold on either. "Think about what you're throwing away," he said. "I am," I answered. "That's why I'm not backing down." I walked out of the cafe knowing the conflict wasn't escalating because of one dinner. It was escalating because I'd refused to return to my place in his world. And once you step out of a system built on silence, it doesn't let you go quietly. The night after that coffee meeting was the first time doubt really crept in. Not the loud kind, not panic, just a slow, insistent whisper that showed up when everything finally went quiet. I sat alone in my apartment, the engagement ring still sitting where he'd left it on the counter days earlier, catching the light every time I moved past it. I hadn't picked it up. I hadn't put it away. I'd just let it exist, like a question neither of us wanted to say out loud. I replayed the dinner again, not the obvious moments, but the smaller ones, the way his friends laughed too quickly, the way his sister avoided my eyes afterward, the way his parents stayed silent, choosing comfort over confrontation. I asked myself if I'd misread it, if maybe I had escalated things unnecessarily, if this really was worth ending an engagement over. That was the dangerous part. The loneliness didn't argue with me. It agreed. It reminded me of the wedding plans already in motion. The deposits, the conversations, the expectations. It reminded me how much easier it would be to apologize, to smooth things over, to frame the night as stress and move on. It reminded me that people change, that relationships require patience, that no one is perfect. And for a moment, I almost believed it. I imagined calling him, telling him we both said things we didn't mean, agreeing that maybe we could learn from this, grow from it, put it behind us. I imagined the relief on his face, the way the tension would dissolve if I just chose harmony over honesty. Then I thought about the waiter. I thought about his face when my fiancé laughed at him, about how small he looked standing there, trying not to react, trying to stay professional while being publicly humiliated. I thought about the message he sent me later, about how close he'd been to quitting, about how being treated like a human being that night had mattered more than the money. And I realized something that made my chest tighten. If I went back, if I minimized what happened, I wouldn't just be forgiving a mistake. I would be agreeing that cruelty was acceptable as long as it was directed at the right people. I would be telling myself that kindness was negotiable, that empathy was optional, that my discomfort was less important than maintaining appearances. That realization hurt more than the breakup itself. I cried then, quietly. Not for him exactly, but for the version of myself that had spent 2 years explaining away behavior she knew, deep down, wasn't right. I cried for how close I'd come to building a life that required me to stay silent in moments that mattered. The lowest point wasn't losing him. It was realizing how easily I could have lost myself. By the time the tears stopped, the apartment felt still again. The doubt hadn't vanished, but it no longer had the same power. I understood something clearly in that moment. Walking away wasn't the dramatic choice. Staying would have been. And once I saw that, there was no going back. The turning point didn't come with a dramatic apology or a sudden revelation from him. It came quietly, the morning after that night of doubt, when I woke up and realized I wasn't waiting for his call. That alone startled me. For days, my phone had felt like a tether. Even when it was silent, I felt its weight, like it was holding open the possibility that this could all be fixed if I just said the right thing. But that morning, I made coffee, stood by the window, and noticed something unfamiliar. Relief. Not the kind that comes from avoidance, but the kind that comes when a truth finally settles into place. I wasn't bracing myself anymore. I wasn't rehearsing explanations. I wasn't wondering how to make him understand. I was simply done trying to translate empathy into a language he respected. I picked up the engagement ring for the first time. It felt heavier than I remembered. Not because of what it symbolized, but because of what I'd been carrying with it. Expectations. Compromises I hadn't named, moments I'd swallowed to keep things smooth. I thought about how often I'd told myself, this isn't worth a fight, when what I really meant was, I don't want to deal with the fallout. That's when I understood something fundamental. The dinner didn't change him. It revealed him. And my reaction didn't create the problem. It exposed it. Later that day, his father called. I hadn't expected that. His voice was calm, measured, the way people speak when they've already thought something through. I wanted to talk to you, he said, about the other night. I braced myself expecting pressure, defense, negotiation. Instead, he surprised me. I understood why you spoke up, he said. My daughter was out of line. I closed my eyes. He continued, slower now. We didn't handle it well. Her mother and I talked about it afterward. We should have said something in the moment. We didn't. That's on us. The admission landed heavier than any apology from my fiancé had, because it came without conditions, without image management. I appreciate you saying that, I replied. He sighed. She's angry. She feels exposed. but that doesn't mean you were wrong. After we hung up, I sat in silence for a long time. That conversation didn't change my decision, but it clarified it. Even someone who loved him deeply could see the issue when they chose honesty over comfort. That afternoon, I met my fiancé one last time. Not to argue, not to negotiate, to be clear. We sat across from each other in a quiet cafe. He looked tired, frustrated, like someone who'd spent days trying to regain control of a narrative that no longer belonged to him. "Have you thought about it?" he asked. "I have," I said, "and I can't do this." "Can't do what?" "I can't marry someone who treats people the way you treated that waiter. I can't build a life with someone who sees empathy as optional." He leaned back, disbelief flickering across his face. "You're really ending our engagement over that?" "I'm ending it over what that moment revealed," I said, "and over the fact that you still don't understand why it was wrong." He went quiet, then defensive, said I was being dramatic, said everyone has bad moments, said he could change. "You shouldn't have to change who you fundamentally are to be kind," I replied, "and I shouldn't have to teach my partner basic human decency." That was the moment the power shifted completely. Not because I was louder, not because I won an argument, but because I stopped needing his agreement. I slid the engagement ring across the table. He stared at it like he didn't recognize it. "Please don't do this," he said, his voice finally cracking. "My family is going to be devastated." "Your family watched you humiliate someone and said nothing," I replied gently. "I'm not sure they get to be devastated." I stood up, feeling strangely calm, grounded, like I'd stepped back into alignment with myself after drifting for too long. This wasn't revenge, it wasn't punishment, it was a boundary, finally enforced. And once that boundary was set, everything else became inevitable. The fallout didn't come all at once. It spread outward, quietly at first, then faster, touching every part of the life we had already begun to intertwine. Within hours of ending the engagement, the messages started. His sister texted first, short, sharp. She said I had embarrassed him publicly, that I'd made a spectacle instead of handling things privately like an adult. She said people have bad nights, and that I'd blown one moment out of proportion. I read it once and didn't respond. I'd already learned that explaining myself to people committed to misunderstanding me was a waste of energy. His friends followed. Some were more subtle, framing their concern as neutrality. "He didn't mean it like that. You know how he gets when things aren't perfect. He's under a lot of pressure." None of them asked how I felt. None of them mentioned the waiter. None of them questioned why cruelty had been so easy for him, or why silence had been so easy for them. His mother called later that evening. Her voice was careful, controlled, the way people sound when they're trying to keep a family narrative intact. She asked if we could talk, really talk, about what happened. She said every couple has rough patches, that marriages are built on forgiveness, that calling off an engagement over a single dinner felt extreme. I listened. Then I said calmly, "This wasn't a rough patch, it was a revelation." She paused. I could hear the discomfort through the phone. I explained that I wasn't ending things because he was rude once. I was ending them because he didn't see anything wrong with it, because he defended it, because he dismissed empathy as weakness, because that wasn't something I could compromise on without losing myself. She didn't argue after that. She just said she was disappointed it had come to this. A day later, his father called again. This time his tone was different. He didn't try to negotiate. He didn't ask me to reconsider. He said, "I want you to know I understand why you did what you did. My daughter was out of line, and so were we for not stopping it." That mattered more than he probably realized. He admitted something quietly then, something that stuck with me. He said they had raised her to believe she was above certain people, that it wasn't intentional cruelty, but it was entitlement, and it had gone unchecked for too long. He apologized for the position I'd been put in, for the silence, for the expectation that I would absorb it. That conversation closed a door I didn't need to slam. My ex, on the other hand, did not take it quietly. He told people I was judgmental, sanctimonious, that I cared more about strangers than about him, that I'd humiliated him intentionally, that I'd chosen a waiter over my own fiancé. He needed that version of the story to survive the reality of what happened. I let him have it. A month later, I heard through mutual friends that the wedding plans had been quietly dismantled. Deposits lost, invitations never sent. Awkward explanations offered and reoffered. His family moved on publicly, but the tension lingered. The dinner had cracked something they couldn't fully ignore anymore. I didn't feel satisfaction, I felt distance. Distance from a life that would have required me to keep excusing behavior I couldn't respect. distance from a future where kindness was conditional. The consequences landed where they were supposed to, and I walked forward without looking back. It's been months now, and my life is quieter in ways I didn't expect. Not empty, not lonely, just honest. The first few weeks after the breakup felt strange. I wasn't heartbroken in the way people expect. I didn't wake up missing him. I didn't replay our good moments on a loop. What I felt instead was space, mental space, emotional space, like I'd been holding my breath for 2 years without realizing it, and suddenly I could inhale fully. I took time off from wedding planning and redirected that energy back into my own life. I spent more time with friends who didn't make jokes at other people's expense. I visited my parents more. I volunteered on weekends, not because I was trying to prove a point, but because being around people who showed quiet kindness grounded me again. It reminded me what normal, unremarkable decency actually looks like. About a month after everything ended, I got a message from the waiter. Someone at the restaurant had passed along my contact information, probably the manager. He wrote to thank me. He said that night had almost made him quit, that being laughed at in front of a full dining room had shaken him more than he wanted to admit. But what I did, standing up for him, tipping him, treating him like a person, had helped him get through a really dark moment. He said the extra cash helped him cover rent. But more than that, it reminded him that not everyone saw him as disposable. I stared at that message for a long time. That mattered to me more than saving face at a fancy dinner ever could. A few months later, I ran into my ex at a mutual friend's party. He was there with someone new, someone from his world. They looked comfortable together. He looked different, more guarded. When he saw me, he hesitated, then came over and asked if we could talk. We stepped outside, away from the noise. He apologized. Really apologized this time. Not for embarrassing me, but for how he'd treated that waiter. He told me he'd started therapy, that he was unpacking how he'd been raised to see certain people as lesser. He didn't ask for me back. He didn't try to justify himself. He just said, "You were right. I needed that wake-up call." I thanked him for saying that, and I meant it. There was no anger left, no need for vindication, just closure. Today, I'm seeing someone new, someone kind without effort, someone who thanks cashiers, tips well, and doesn't need to be reminded that people are people. The first time we went out to eat together, our server spilled water on the table. Without missing a beat, he laughed softly and said, "No worries, happens to everyone." The relief on that server's face told me everything I needed to know. That's when I understood the real lesson of that dinner. How someone treats the people they think don't matter will eventually be how they treat you. Maybe not at first. Maybe not while you're still impressive. But eventually. You can't build a life with someone who lacks basic empathy. You can't compromise on kindness. And you can't fix cruelty by loving it harder. Ending that engagement wasn't dramatic, it wasn't impulsive, it was necessary. That waiter was a mirror, and I'm grateful I looked into it before it was too late.